Okay, so the black phone. Okay, oh god, don't be mad. We're gonna have some fun, but I have many thoughts. Based on the short story of the same name by Joe Hill, The Black Phone is so close to being a great movie that it's just the way that it is. Does that mean? I think that's a little mean. We'll recorrect here. I know a lot of people love this movie. I'm actually genuinely shocked at how high the ratings are on Rotten Tomatoes, and they're a little bit more reasonable on Metacritic, but I certainly didn't hate it, but a lot of it really annoyed me, so I went ahead and read that short story to see how it stacked up and how they chose to flesh it out, and mostly I'm still just confused, not by the story itself, but just by I don't know. This is such a mid horror movie. It's just so mid. But the building blocks are all kind of there, so we'll just kind of go through it. But the story itself takes place in a 1978 Colorado town experiencing a series of child abductions before our lead Finney gets taken and shut into a dingy basement with nothing other than a toilet and a broken black phone on the wall. If you could not see, we got somebody on the black phone right now behind me. I tried to move the art around so that you could see the black phone one better, but the strings are just for our art purposes. They are built in to the wall. But the longer that Finney is trapped in this room, the more the phone begins to ring. So the building blocks of the story between the two are essentially the same. The minimal dialogue in the story makes its way into the movie almost verbatim, but I'm just really not a fan of how they chose to flesh the story out. The short story seems fairly ambiguous in how it approaches the supernatural aspects of the story, and the movie just takes a very clear stance on it. And by the end, so much of what's going on in this movie has no bearing to the actual outcome of the story, and then just pulled away so much tension that it was working to build, and it really just felt like it was because they needed more to shove into this to make it a feature-length film length. But it kind of seems like I'm the minority there with that opinion, but we will see if you guys agree with what I'm putting down. And another thing, if you've seen the trailer, you've essentially seen the entire movie.
You raise the phone, step back, and swing.
So I'm glad I didn't see it until after I watched the movie, because I actually have no idea how this movie would have managed to achieve any kind of tension building, any kind of fear, any kind of anything to the people who'd already seen the trailer. The ending is pretty badass though, but we'll get there. I think Ethan Hawke did a great job as the grabber. The mask setup is pretty interesting and menacing. I think the kids did a decent job, the main ones at least, especially the sister, even if a major aspect of her story does annoy me. I also somehow just found out that Joe Hill, the author of the short story, is Stephen King's son, and nothing has made more sense to me in my life while also being extremely surprising to hear. But before we dive in, if you're looking to avoid being harassed by nonstop phone calls like Finney here in the black phone, you need to check out today's sponsor, Incogni, a privacy tool that helps get your personal data removed from the hands of data brokers. Every day, your data is being sold online by brokers without you even knowing. That means your email, phone number, full name, birth date, and more are just bouncing around out there for anyone to purchase. Maybe you signed up for a newsletter and immediately started getting spam emails, or had to fill out some information on a store's website and then started getting spam calls. It cycles from annoying to downright concerning and violating. Now the good news is that you can request to have this information deleted from these data brokers, but to do it manually could take years. So that's where Incogni steps in. They reach out to these data brokers on your behalf to have the information removed, deal with the objections, and the entire process is automated. So all you need to do is make an account, give Incogni the right to work on your behalf, and just sit back and let them do the rest. They'll keep you updated as they go and handle the back and forth stress-free. With data breaches on the rise every year, let Incogni do the heavy lifting for you by heading over to incogni.com/Amanda to sign up today. If you're one of the first 100 people to sign up using code Amanda, you save 20%, so make sure to check out Incogni today. So into the movie, which starts with a baseball match where our main character Finney is up against this kid named Bruce Yamato. He was almost immediately snatched up by a literal child abduction van, the latest in a series of abductions by someone known as the Grabber. But then the movie kicks into its opening title sequence, which is just one of those creepy artistic stock footage intros that starts throwing in some things that tie into movie, but then just progressively gets more disturbing, and it's very reminiscent of Gabe from The Office's Halloween video.
Okay.
Which brings us back to Finney. He and his sister Gwen live with their abusive alcoholic father, and we're talking abusive to the extent of walking on eggshells because you opened the bread box too loud. And the sister's a pretty interesting character. I really like her. She's got a lot of personality compared to Finney, who's a little bit more quiet. And while she originally just seems like this like hype supporter for all the people around her, she says one of the best lines of the entire movie. When they're walking to school and see fresh flyers that the Amadas put up looking for Bruce, Finney says,
"You don't think they're gonna find them, do you?"
Not how they want to.
Oof! So like I thought that this was just like a particularly bright and enlightened kid, but she's enlightened in an entirely different way. They make her fucking psychic, which we will get to, but first, bullies.
I will pound you like a nail, you scrawny little beaner.
Blumhouse just really investing all their cash into the child actors this year, really doing a great job. Either way, this other kid here, Robin, just pummels the shit out of him, absolutely to excess, but it's gonna go on to be a lesson that Finney needs to learn. That's like sometimes you have to fuck people up to excess, otherwise you'll always be the victim.
You're gonna have to stand up for yourself one of these days.
Robin's a cool kid though, genuinely cool and kind, if not overly violent. But here's where the whole thing starts to go off the rails for me. Little sister gets pulled into the principal's office to talk to a couple of detectives because she told Bruce Yamada's sister that she had a dream about him being kidnapped by a man with black balloons and a van. Apparently they had found black balloons at a couple of the crime scenes but never released this to the public, so they think she has some kind of like connection to these details somewheres and might have a link to the killer. But because she's a child, she obviously immediately thinks she's being accused of something.
Because obviously I'm the grabber, you dumb fucking fart knockers.
Gwendolyn!
Fart knocker. It's a great insult. Bravo. But this is where she reveals that sometimes the dreams she has are right. So yeah, psychic kid, just what we need. I'm fucking stoked. I'm not stoked at all. But because the cops started sniffing around, they end up questioning the dad at work, and he starts beating her with the belt for it. And it's fucking brutal. Like apparently the mom used to see things and had dreams, but ultimately ended up killing herself. So obviously the dad's concerned that something similar could happen to the daughter. So obviously the solution is to beat the shit out of her. Just A1 primo logic there.
You are not your mother!
Finney actor is real good at making this face of pure disdain though. The hate is packed into those eyes. But tragically, Robin here ends up getting nabbed by a magician-looking motherfucker before comically cutting away to the opening to emergency. So obviously, once he finds out what happened, Finney asks Gwen to do her dream thing to find him. So she turns to Jesus, which is just such a tonal disconnect, but whatever. In the short story, the sister is older and interested in the occult, but it's never suggested as something that she can actually do anything with. It's just kind of like him imagining what the people outside those walls are doing trying to find him. So to switch things up to Jesus-fueled visions where the detectives are knocking at her door for help is fucking weird. Either way, now that Robin's gone, the bullies see this as open hunting season, which is when the sister just comes out of field and just bashes this kid in the face with a rock before being body slammed into the ground and kicked in the jaw. And the kid she just hit starts gushing blood out of his head, so I'm thinking like, okay, jail time, severe concussion, maybe getting arrested and sent to juvie, but no, it just cuts to Finney in class talking to a girl. Like the sister's jaw should be busted. But no, she just splits off to go visit a friend overnight, which is when Finn runs into a man with a painted white face dropping his groceries, which is where the short story starts. So this weirdo that Finney should absolutely know better than to talk to asks if he wants to see a magic trick because he's a part-time magician. Shit, dude, not even good enough to be a full-time magician? That's rough. Also, in the short story, he is actually a part-time clown, which makes more sense with the balloons and honestly the painted face that we see here, but I'm guessing they changed it to avoid more comparisons to Pennywise with the balloons. But the grabber was specifically supposed to be based on John Wayne Gacy, which means he's also supposed to be quite overweight and out of shape, and once described in the book as a hippo performing ballet. The movie went in a different direction. Ethan wanted that chunky muscle. But Finn literally sees black balloons in the back of the van, which he should know by now to look out for because of his sister, but then just asks, are those black balloons, and edges closer to the van, which just gives this dude the clear chance to shove him in the back, even after Finney manages to stab his arm. And no one notices in broad daylight around numerous houses. Okay, so we've got a part-time magician, full-time murder pedo on our hands. I'm still so mad that he didn't run. Like, if there had been a faster turnaround time between him noticing the balloons and getting grabbed, like, maybe it would be okay, but No. And then he just suddenly has this creepy mask, which you'd think he would have wanted to have on when he kidnaps kids in broad daylight in his very identifiable work van, but oh well. The mask isn't in the short story. I definitely think it's a nice touch. It definitely makes things more creepy because you can't really tell a lot of what's going on his face, and it kind of operates in sections if they do want to show us more reactions. So he's got one that has a smile, one with a frown, one with nothing, and then the top section has the horns. This is an area where I noticed a fairly major script fuck up. The grabber calls him Johnny, and I was very confused while watching and thought that it might have just been like a random name he calls him. But then in the short story, his name is Johnny Finney, and people just call him Finney, but the movie changed his name to Finney Blake, even though the movie description says that his last name is Shaw. So I have no idea what happens there. It's a pretty small thing, but it just kind of feels like they copy and pasted all the dialogue from the short story into like the script, and then no one caught like his name isn't Johnny in the movie. But it's fine. Ethan's character is very menacing. He's got a real creepy playfulness to him that definitely gives the full child Schmeditor vibes that I can't say here on YouTube lest I be demonetized, but it's absolutely what it's alluding to in the movie and in the story. Derrickson even described the role to Ethan in that way. But as he's mentioning bringing Finney a soda, he says he hears the phone start to ring upstairs. And at first I thought it didn't actually ring, but then I like jacked up the audio on headphones, and it is a very faint ringing in the background, and I think it's really just to stress how little the sound carries between this basement to the rooms upstairs.
Your earphone ring?
Yeah, Ethan really threw his old Ethan Hussey into this role. But immediately I see the best possible weapon, the top of the toilet tank. You wait by the door with that, crack him in the head, motherfucker is going down, or at least down long enough for you to shut him in the room, or like double tap him. But obviously that's not gonna happen here. It then cuts to Gwen finding out about Finney, and honestly my first thought was, yeah, that'll teach you to pray to Jesus for things. You said Finney needed his friends, so Jesus just sent him to the same place. Should've just minded your own damn psychic business. So then she runs out of the house, and it looks like they just had her running on a treadmill here. Okay. But anyways, it cuts to her praying again before Finney wakes up to the sound of the clearly busted phone ringing. He's already tested the phone at this point, so he assumes it's a dream hallucination, but still answers. Which is when we find out the grabber was just in here watching him. He lets him know that the phone hasn't worked since he was a kid, but he swears he heard it ring once and assumes it had to be because of static electricity. Yeah, the static electricity of guilt! But something has gone wrong. It seems like someone's shown up to visit, and we'll obviously notice if he's just spending a bunch of time disappearing in the basement. We don't ever really find out much about the grabber, but when Finney points out that he's the one that killed the other kids, the grabber tries to say that it wasn't him.
I will never make you do anything that you won't like.
Which is just the most chilling line, and I'm sure relates to a planned assault where he's convinced himself the kids would be into it. Ugh. But if they're trying to do something where like different personality pieces of him enact themselves in different ways depending on which mask he has on, they don't do that well. But then this kid basically gives up before he even tries. He sees the window and assumes that if Robin couldn't have gotten out, there's no way he could. The phone rings again, but no one's there. In the short story, he doesn't actually start hearing the phone ringing until after the grabber says that he swears he heard it ring once, making the pretty clear implication that Finney was just hallucinating because of hunger and isolation. But it also left it open to a supernatural element if that's the direction you would have preferred to go in, which I think is the much better way to take it. The movie just hard steers in. The next scene is genuinely unsettling though. Finney wakes up to the grabber watching him sleep, and it feels like they had Ethan take off the top section of the mask so you could really see his unhinged tears when he says he's just down there to look at him.
Just to look at you? I just wanted to look at you.
And from here the phone starts ringing, but there's actually people on the other end. It starts cycling through the various victims, and the first one is Bruce. Though he had to be reminded of his name because apparently it's the first thing you lose.
First thing you lose when?
You know when.
In death. Now in the short story, Bruce is the only person he gets a phone call from because Bruce is the only victim that he'd ever had any kind of interaction with, which makes sense if it's just your brain filling in pieces. But I feel like the way the phone rang the first time after Gwen snapped out of prayer is the movie suggesting that she like conjured the spirits to offer up their help or just connects to them when they're active. Except Bruce says that the phone's always been ringing, but Finney's just the first one who could hear it other than the grabber who just doesn't want to believe it's ringing. Never really goes into into that though, but this call is a little bit weird. Like Bruce keeps repeating things, things he said to Finney while alive, but then tells him about loose tiles where he tried to dig his way out of the basement, so Finney tries to keep digging. Which is when it cuts to Gwen having a dream of Bruce growing up, getting kidnapped, then it like flips to Finney trying to break out of a door. So she starts trying to find the house with that matching door, but the more it cuts back to her, the more it just cuts the tension from the movie. But hey, Grabber finally brings him some food.
What did you put in that?
Salt and pepper.
He's so playful with his plans. But when he leaves, he doesn't completely shut the door, which is when Finney gets a call from another missing boy, Billy, letting him know that it's a trap, before cutting to his bloodied up spirit ghost. And even though he was warned off, Finney still starts walking his ass up those stairs. Didn't even bring a potential weapon. We've got a glass bottle, a tray, he could have broken the plate, again, the entire toilet cover. But sure enough, Creepo is waiting upstairs for him shirtless with a frowny mask, just heavy breathing. Thankfully, Finney heads back down. Also, what if he had gone up there? Were you just gonna beat him in full line of hearing of your brother? He was obviously gonna start screaming the second you grabbed him. I also love that this appears to be a fake soda company, Lemon Spray. It's like they tried to get Sprite and Coke was like, nah. It then randomly cuts to the sister falling asleep in class before cutting back to Finney waking up to the phone ringing. It'll cut back to her after the next scene of her having like another premonition nap in the nurse's office, but it just feels like it's like cutting through all the tension being built in that room. But he answers the phone and it's Billy again, who doesn't want to be called Billy and starts playing Spin the Bottle to let Finn know what he should be trying to do to escape next. And this scene just annoyed the fuck out of me. He somehow manages to feed this limp cable up through a carpet through the grate, but then struggles to get the traction to climb up. Like, just put the carpet back against the wall and use that for traction. Then he ties a knot in the cables to step on, which was smart, but instead of just tying another knot to make it more like a ladder, he just spends a bunch of time struggling to grab the latch, which pulls the grate out. And honestly, I think amazing. Now you can just break the glass and find a way to climb up, stack some carpets, there's literally 4 of them, and climb your ass out. But no, of course not. At some point, the sister has a dream about Billy getting nabbed and then the grabber just in front of what we assume is the murder house. Again, it looks cool, but it just pulls out the tension. I also hate anything that just makes regular pervs seem like a supernatural force. But the dad actually starts to trust her long enough to go driving around town to try to find a house that matches the dream, which doesn't work, but the cops have been canvassing and end up at a house with this man who's been conducting his own investigation into the abductions. He's pretty sure that based on the locations of the kidnappings and what would have been required not to get noticed, the grabber must live in this particular area. But the cops don't take him seriously, probably because of the table of coke he has over here.
Stupid moron.
But he mentions that he's staying with his brother, and the grabber just happens to have a male guest visiting that messed up his plans? I'm surprised the cops didn't look into him more though. Perpetrators love over-involving themselves in investigations. But we don't have to wait long to have that theory confirmed. It pans down beneath him to reveal Finney in the basement, digging his big ol' hole. So when the creepo comes back home, he baits Finney into lying about his name, but then doesn't punish him for it. He just leaves the door unlocked again and assumes the position on the chair while nodding off. The position is pervert, by the way. And instead of the phone ringing this time, Finney sees the floating, bleeding body of one of the kids that points him back to the phone to pick up. And this kid is Griffin, who has the creepiest little laugh.
You don't have much time.
Who lets Finney know that he's running out of time to escape. The grabber hasn't been sleeping and can't enact his plans because of the brother and is worried he's gonna get caught. And because of all that, he hasn't been able to play his favorite game, Naughty Boy, which just seems to be, you leave the room, I beat your ass in, until part 2.
And the next part of Naughty Boy was his favorite part.
Ugh. But you think him lying about his name would have counted as being naughty so he could push the game forward? Oh well, this kid says that the grabber's been using his combination lock to lock the door and that he etched the code into the wall. So like, how are we gonna get around the brother being in the house while he's just hanging out looking at the basement door in a mask? How is he explaining the lock on the storm door? Whatever, he knows the grabber's asleep, so he heads upstairs to undo the lock, manages to do it, but then the dog starts barking. So after barely escaping, the grabber nabs him and he's right back in the room. And for some reason, doesn't belt him, just knocks him out with a punch. At this point, he's been injured more by bullies on screen than a literal child murderer. The only belt I've seen flying is the dad's. I'm sure there's something with the grabber where he was abused as a child and that's why he's turned it into this like sick game for his broken mind, but oh, it doesn't matter. Also, I don't know why Finn didn't just immediately run up to one of the neighbors' houses, but oh well. Now, through all this, I thought that the brother might have been out or something, like maybe off getting another fix, but apparently he was in the house the whole time.
Hey, what was all that noise I heard? Samson was barking at something. Go back to bed, Max.
Like, how were you gonna explain this getup if you happen to walk into the kitchen? Whatever, it cuts to the sister who is pissed that she didn't have a fresh dream.
Jesus, what the fuck?
Which ultimately results in her questioning the existence of Jesus? This is just an entire B-plot, which we do not need and feels like a completely different movie. So we get one more mystery kid phone call, Vance Hopper, who we get a nice little background story for. No clue why he gets the added treatment here. Also, his thing kicks off with Fox on the Run, which just all the tension evaporated. Great song though. But it ends up blending into a dream the sister's having where Vance carves 7741 into this other kid's arm before they end up at house 7741. But somehow she forgets the address and has to start biking around town to try and find the house in her little Georgie jacket.
Will do.
But it cuts back to Finney still on the phone with Vance, who actually asks the one thing I've been thinking, like, have you tried stacking the carpets to get up to the window? And he says he has, but it didn't work, but it absolutely would have worked. You're just being a little bitch. He then goes on to tell him that there's a spot that he can break through the wall in the bathroom, which would lead to a freezer from behind. Then he could break out through it into a storage room. This part is just dumb to me on so many levels. This was never gonna work. But then he starts bashing in the wall with the toilet tank lid. You know, the thing you could have been using as an exceedingly strong weapon? Either way, it doesn't work. You can't open the freezer from the inside. So he gets his final call, and it's Robin, who says he's been with him the entire time.
My dad didn't leave his buddies behind when he went to Nam. That's why he didn't come home. And I'm not coming home either.
Oh my god. What a fucking line. So today's the day Finney's gonna have to stand up for himself. Robin tells him to fill the phone receiver with dirt to give it some heft as a weapon. Hey, you know what else has heft even when it's broken? A toilet tank lid. I was gonna be bothered no matter what, but I am inconsolably angry that he didn't use it as a weapon when he used it as something to bash in a wall. Right around now is when Gwen gets startled by the ghosts of the dead boys, obviously right outside the house, the one she saw the grabber outside in her dreams. She finally calls the detectives. The grabber is buying body disposal supplies. His brother Max finally realizes that the house he's in is exactly where he assumed the grabber would be located.
No fucking way.
So it's all finally coming together, but the music choice here is just super weird for the tone of the situation. Also, I assumed that Finney was gonna kill him by mistake, but oh no, the grabber kills him.
You made me kill my brother. He was an idiot, but he was my idiot.
But seriously though, he never once felt tempted to walk into the basement that whole time. Like, it's just a door right here in the kitchen. So the cops show up and enter the house, but it's empty except for what seems to be the buried bodies. So for like 2 seconds, I thought that there was a chance that the stuff with Finney had already happened and then the stuff with the sister was the stuff happening in real time, meaning that Finney was already dead. But no, the grabber just has 2 houses on a part-time magician's salary.
I'm gonna take my time.
Says he's gonna take his time and then goes in for a massive swing with an axe. Unrelated, what the hell is up with the CGI on this dog? It looks like it has a panther head. Whatever, the rest is pretty badass. Finney goes all home alone on his shit and incorporates all the failed plans from the other boys into one. He trips the grabber with the wire from Billy into the hole he was digging from Bruce, which snaps his ankle through the window grate, which he had somehow never noticed was no longer in the window. Never mind. Then he just starts wailing on him with the phone receiver from Robin, pulls off his mask, which makes him freak out, which I don't get because he wasn't wearing a mask when he nabbed Finney. Like, his face was painted, but not masked. So he smacks him a couple more times before switching over to strangling him with the phone cord. But you know who would have taken him out with like 1 or 2 hits? The toilet tank lid. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave it alone. So as he's strangling, the phone rings.
It's for you.
The kids start spewing out their lines again, which I thought was pretty lame, actually. I think they could have picked like one really sinister line, or like them all kind of coming together to say one thing all creepy like, or just cut to him having his neck snapped after it says "it's for you" with a look of shock on his face. Because that's how it ends in the book. It's just kind of ambiguous as to whether or not the grabber could actually hear anything on the phone. So he's dead. The dog amounts to nothing. Finn just tosses it a steak from the freezer, which ties into Vance, and then walks out after opening the lock with Griffin's info to find the sister, who honestly didn't accomplish anything. Like, yeah, she led them to the house with the bodies, but they would have found them soon enough after Finney got out. It just felt like they couldn't find a clear, solid way to flesh out this story into something more complete and just tossed in psychic sister. But then the dad shows up and is all apologetic for being an abusive shitbag, and I think I would have enjoyed this way more if they hadn't just looked at each other somberly, but if Finney had just laid down the fucking "if you touch us again, I'll break your neck," because he's supposed to be all badass standing up for himself now. But no. Like, obviously I would prefer the dad to just learn himself not to be abusive, but like, come on. The chief then goes on to repeat exactly what we just saw happen with no additional information? Like, did they not think we'd understand that the grabber had 2 houses, so they needed to explicitly say that? Then it just ends with him being the new school hero. The bullies aren't touching him, and he's decided to just be Finn now. And hopefully got the girl. And yeah, that's it. It just feels like it's really lacking something to push it over into being an amazing movie. The kids on the phone go back and forth from being like menacing and creepy while they're trickling out the grabber information to just feeling like really goofy. Like, it feels like they wanted to set up all these clever little puzzles for him to solve, but it doesn't come out that way, and it just feels very disconnected in different aspects of the story. I just think the script needed a few more passes to make sure it would like maintain that vibe and keep it horrifying and tense, because it ultimately just feels like a failed supernatural story and a grounded one too. But again, based on the reviews, I seem to be in the minority here. Let me know what you guys like, what stood out to you. Again, I'm not saying that this is a bad movie. I just feel it is very mid. Like, mid is the word to describe it. It's like Thor was mid, Black Phone is mid. That's where I'm feeling right now. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks again to Incogni for sponsoring this video, and thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All of my social medias are linked down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.